Great leaders are always learning. Tune in each week as we dig deep into the minds of America's top leaders and uncover their secrets for success and the pivotal moments that got them there. If you are looking for executive coaching that will drive you and your team to the winning goal line, this is the podcast for you.
Hey guys, welcome to another edition of the Leaders Playbook. As you know, every week we'll have a guest come on that's an exceptional leader that's done some amazing things in their industry, that leads people through adversity and all the above. What we're here to do is get the tips and the insights from these exceptional leaders and bring them here on set so that we can all benefit from this knowledge and, again, this insight. And so today, super excited, have Mr. Scott Flannery, CEO of United Healthcare over this entire region. And man, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me, Justin. Appreciate it.
So going back to how you and I met,
Yep.
Interesting story. We have a mutual friend. And we go out to what was my first kick and shoot quail hunt. And so he had told me, knowing that I'm in healthcare, there's this guy, he's a pretty big deal. He's part of the United Healthcare CEO. You need to meet this guy. And I think you guys will like each other. And so I'm sitting there at breakfast that morning of the first hunt, and he says to me, so I have a group of guys sitting at the table, and there's this older gentleman with white hair, and so Ted tees it up, I guess. He's like, hey, Justin, how's business going? So I'm like, well, this must be the guy. And so I start telling him how business is going, and this guy takes out his readers and his cell phone and starts texting. I was like, well, that didn't work out. I don't know that this is gonna jive. And then so later that afternoon, I'm on the hunt, and I'm talking to this guy. He's super cool. We're talking football and all this other stuff, real chill guy. And I look over at him, and I'm like, so what do you do? And he's like, I'm the CEO of United Healthcare. My name's Scott Flannery. I was like, this is the guy, man. This is perfect. And so
I remember that.
Ted was right, man.
Yeah.
So
Appreciate that.
thanks for coming on.
Yeah.
Again, so here today, just want to learn a little bit about
Sure.
you and again, have you share your wisdom with our viewers on
Okay.
what it takes to be an exceptional leader.
Okay.
So
Great.
tell us a little bit about you.
Yeah, so again, I've been with United Healthcare for 23 years in July. I started as a sales guy, kind of worked my way up through the ranks and just did many different roles and positions as I went up there. But I was originally born in Pennsylvania. I went to Ursinus College, where I played football and wrestled. Was fortunate enough my senior year to earn All-American honors as a wrestler. And I think those things really kind of set me up to be in the business world when I graduated. So that competition and kind of that discipline and all those things, I think, has kind of really propelled me into my career and the things that I've done over the course of the 20-some years. So.
Yeah, wow, I bet. I mean, wrestling of all things too, so competitive, and it's like you against another guy. You've got to have some stuff to take that on.
It's embarrassing when you lose, I can tell you that.
Oh,
and that obviously has happened to anybody that's wrestled has lost. So it's a humbling experience.
For
So.
sure, and for some of us, embarrassing to be in a singlet. So.
Yeah, well, nowadays for sure, but
yeah,
it
with
wasn't
the
so bad back
spotlight
then.
on you.
Yeah.
So you've got kind of an impressive family. Tell me a bit about the siblings and what you got going on there.
So I have an older brother that played 10 years in the NFL, or I guess 10 seasons in the NFL. He was drafted in '92, and so he went to the Houston Oilers. I've got a little sister who played Division I softball, and so athletics has run deep in our family. I've got a daughter now that plays Division I soccer, and I have a son who just wrapped up his 12-year hockey career, and so athletics was always a big part of our family.
Got some athletes. You're the middle of the siblings?
I am the middle.
So
yes.
did your big brother beat on you and all that?
Yeah, oh yeah. Well, he's 6'4", 300 some pounds. So yeah, I've lost my share of those battles as well.
Yeah.
I won one or two every now and then, but for the most part, I was on the L column is definitely bigger than the W column.
Oh yeah. Well, that's being the little brother. I experienced that myself. So, how about home life? Do you have kids and?
Yep.
All that?
Yeah, so two kids, wife.
Yeah.
My wife and I have been married 23 years. We've been
Congrats.
married. We've lived in Plano pretty much since we moved to Texas. We moved to Texas about 25 years ago. Transferred out of the Philadelphia marketplace where I was working for Prudential Healthcare, and they transferred me to Dallas. It was kind of interesting. I'll tell you this real funny story real quick. So they came to me and said they had a training program, and they said when you sign up for this, it's not like this anymore, but when you sign up for the training program, you had to agree to be relocated for 2 years, and if you didn't go, then you owed back whatever they spent for you on training. And so, I was not a great college student, but I was very focused on this because I learned was the higher you rank in the class, the best pick you get of what market you're going to move to.
Oh, okay.
So I finished number 1 in the class, and I knew Dallas had an open position, so they said, list your top 5 choices. I wrote Dallas, 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 Dallas. I think that's 5. So I ended up moving to Dallas
Nice.
as a result of that, and so and that was with Prudential, and that really kind of got my career started.
Yeah, and that was kind of something I was going to ask you is what was the career path? So coming out of college, you went right to Prudential and
Yeah, I interviewed. So like I said, I focused much more on athletics than I did on academics, which was hindsight, I guess, was okay. Probably should have spent more time. And so I interviewed for just the time I graduated from college. Everybody was getting the jobs as pharmaceutical sales reps. That was the job to have. I quickly found out that with my GPA that they weren't going to hire. Or they weren't going to hire me, I should say. And one of the funniest things, this funny story, I was in an interview and I said to the guy, I said, would you rather have somebody with a 2.4, that was an all-American athlete and that could carry a conversation? Would you rather have a 4.0 that, spent all their time studying? And I guess he chose the 4.0 because I never got a call back, which was really funny because it ended up, for me, it ended up being a good thing, from a career standpoint. And so, I ended up in the insurance business and started off with that.
Well, you didn't start out as a CEO, so tell me about the ladder and how long it took you to kind of really start ascending, and what were some of the things you did? Because that's a hard goal to achieve.
Yeah, so I had I was dating a girl from college, and her father was a very successful salesman and had his own business, and he was really the kind of driving force, and to this day I still consider him. He passed away last year, great guy. But I considered him a mentor, and he's like, with your personality, Scott, and the things that you've done, you should really think about getting in the sales. That's kind of the spot for you. And so it was really kind of at his advice or his kind of guidance that I got into the sales roles. And so that's kind of started my career. Interestingly enough, early on, especially when I started having some success, I said stupid things like, who would ever get into management? Like, this is the greatest thing ever, being in sales. You work your own schedule and you get to do these things. And so really early on, and with the success I had as a sales guy, I never thought about being in leadership or management. In fact, I looked at some of the folks that I reported to and said, why would I ever do that?
Yeah.
But obviously that changed over time.
So did, at United Healthcare, so how did you feel like they identified you to move into more of a formal leadership role? Is there something going on internally there where they identify talent? Or
we do. I think we didn't do as good a job back then. What I would say is that, and this is, I don't mean this to sound arrogant, but I kind of promote it myself, and here's what happened. We were growing tremendously at the time here in the Dallas Health Plan, and the gentleman that I was reporting to had what I thought was too much on his plate. In the fact that there were sales reps that needed some guidance and some coaching, and so I basically went to him and just said, listen, you don't have to pay me anymore, but let me run the sales team, and if you just get me an intern to help me with some of the minutia, the volume of the RFPs that were coming in, then I'll help coach the sales team and we'll kind of get them running. So I did that just as an informal kind of first leadership role after saying things like I'd never get into leadership, and I really enjoyed it because it was able to take the things that I could do and kind of multiply them amongst a sales team and driving strategy and direction and those things. And so that was really kind of my first caveat or first taste of that, and I really enjoyed it. I was surprised how much I enjoyed it, and that was kind of how I kind of got started into leadership and into management. But again, it was kind of like at my own asking. It really wasn't like a formal promotion or anything like that.
So you're collegiately, it's an individual sport, wrestling, not to say, you played football and otherwise. Sales can in many ways be led by your own individual efforts. So then you get kind of thrust into this leadership role and you find yourself in a position where it's like, man, I kind of like this. Is that, why do you think that was really?
Well, you know what, it's funny, it was kind of the opposite, right? So I realized one of the things that helped me be successful as a sales guy was the ability to partner and to bring other people into the process. And so, to me, everybody had a role, right? And so too many sales guys as an example, would go in and say, okay, I'm running the show, and they'd get an hour meeting with a customer, and they wouldn't introduce the service team, or they wouldn't introduce the back room folks. And so I think pretty early on, I realized that, hey, if I can get these folks engaged and get them to start building relationships, because as a sales guy in many businesses, once the sale's made, you're kind of in the back room on some of that stuff. And so it was really important to me to say, okay, we've got to make sure that they understand who their team is and they feel comfortable with them, and that's going to help me sell.
Yeah.
And so I think that was the aha moment for me, and that's one of the things I started encouraging, to the folks that I was coaching at the time, it's like, you got to bring your team in, you got to have them be part of the process, and that's going to make you successful.
Yeah, that makes sense. So really kind of creating a legacy among your team and being able to pass the torch, kind of maybe what I'm hearing there, but what are some of those fundamentals, some of those attributes you possess as a leader that you think has helped you to succeed in your role?
Well, success is obviously defined differently for different folks. I feel like one of the things that I do is I just try to be authentic, and I'm not out to really impress my bosses. I don't think. I mean, hopefully I've done that over the course of the years, but that's not what I wake up in the morning thinking about. I wake up in the morning thinking about the folks I work with, the things that they need to be successful. I believe if you're a good leader, if the people around you are successful, you can't help but be successful. Right. But if you focus on your success, I think you make probably some decisions that disenfranchise your team, and I think that's probably not good. And let's face it, leadership has changed over the past 3 or 4 decades. The whole I'm the boss, you do what I say. That's not really the way things work, and or especially not nowadays. And so it's really about kind of engaging your team, hiring good people, letting them make decisions, and just kind of providing guidance and a little bit of leadership along the way.
A big component of that probably is like the HR side and recruiting the right talent and having the right talent, the right executive talent around you guys that are self-motivated, that don't need to be prompted and prodded along. Is that something that you benefit from at UHC?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Good hirings?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just admit it right off. I like hiring athletes. They understand the team environment. They also understand the balance that you need and the sacrifice that needs to be made. And so I try to surround myself with people that are in that mode. Not that they have to be an athlete, but that they're able to balance multiple things and do those things. And so that's what I look for when we're hiring, is kind of that team atmosphere. I want to be involved. I want to work as a team, and that's it has served us well as a business.
Sure, well, because you're going to battle in many ways, however you define that, but the day-to-day challenges. Speaking on that, so as you've kind of, maybe it's worn out, but as you led through a pandemic, what were some of the challenges that you guys faced, that you faced, and how did you keep this team focused and directed through the pandemic?
Yeah, so I think transparency is probably the most important part, especially in the pandemic. But I think it's the most important part always. And so just sharing information, as much information as you can get. I'll give you a good example. Is one of the things that we do on a monthly basis is I share the financials of the health plan with all of the employees inside the health plan. And some people may say, well, that's sometimes it's good, sometimes it's bad. But my point to that is I want them to understand. I want our teams to understand why we're doing what we're doing. So whether we're pushing on this area of the business or we're pushing on that area of the business, I think it's more important that people understand that. I had a boss very early on. I loved the guy. He was a great guy. But one of the things that he did that so let me sidetrack. One of the things I always thought was, as a leader, you learn as much from quote unquote bad leaders as you learn from good leaders. And what you learn from bad leaders is, if I'm ever a leader, I'm not going to do that. And so what I learned from this gentleman, who again, I really liked the guy and I respected him, but the one thing I took away was, lack of transparency. And so there was times where you were, if you just were honest with me, I could probably get behind this and we could get moving a lot faster. And so I just always decided that transparency and honesty with folks is the way I'm going to lead. And sometimes that bites you, but at the end of the day, if you're consistent in that, I think you'll win more times than you won't.
That's great. Well, let's get back on the personal stuff a little bit. Let's shift a little bit. So tell me a little bit about your drivers. What are your hobbies? I know a couple of these, but
anything that has to do with the outdoors is, I would say I would rank them. Watching my kids play sports is probably the number one, my favorite thing to do. And then right after that is spending time in the outdoors, whether it's hunting or fishing or whether it's hiking or whatever it might be, or if it's spending some time on a tractor. Those are the things that I really, really enjoy to do outside of working.
So on the hunt I referenced earlier, you were talking about this turkey hunt. Tell me about that, because that was really interesting.
So I failed. So it's the Turkey Grand Slam, which is there's 4 major species of turkey in North America, and I was only able to get 3 out of the 4. So I failed. I may try it again here in a few more years, but as funny as it may sound, it was an exhausting experiment. Like it was. it was, there's mornings where you wake up and you're like, I'd really like to stay in bed today. But you're like, I'm on this quest, and so you kind of keep pushing yourself through it.
How many people have accomplished this?
With a bow, I think there's only like 40 some people that have ever done it, all in the same year. Plenty of people have done it, and plenty of people have done it with a bow, but all of them in the same year, which that was the challenge.
It's a commitment, though. It wasn't. I was surprised when you were telling me about this. It's not like regional to Texas. I mean, you were going all over the country, right?
So, Wyoming, Florida, Pennsylvania, Texas.
Wow.
So in about a 30-day time period.
And not bad. I mean, you're getting to go out and hunt. And
absolutely. I'm not complaining.
Yeah, and with a bow.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. Let me think here. I wanted to ask you a couple other questions. Hopping back to industry.
Yeah.
Just trying to shake you up a little bit.
That's right.
But you hop back to industry. So what do you foresee some of the challenges that have, I think, been imposed on the healthcare industry in general through COVID testing? How is the insurance companies? I mean, it's had to have been a pretty major drain on the system overall. Like, how do we?
Well, I think we learned a lot too, right?
Yeah.
So I think one of the things that came out of the pandemic that was really positive was that the kind of increased utilization of things like telemedicine, right? And so that was great. I mean, went from very, mid-teen utilization to the 80s and 90s, and challenge now is keeping it there.
Yeah.
I think we learned a lot of things around remote monitoring, and how do we use kind of maybe not the normal settings to make sure that we're taking care of patients and helping them be healthy. And I think we learned a lot about our people. We learned a lot about how resilient, number one, folks can be, and then number two is how effective they could be working in this changed environment. I'm not personally a huge fan of 100% telecommuting, but I see where it has its value, and so I think when balanced and deployed properly. So those things are that we learned, and I think there'll be good learnings. Will there ever be another snow day at school? Probably not, right?
Yeah.
Like we could switch to virtual in the matter of hours and do those things. So, we learned a lot of things through the pandemic, and so I think there are things that'll be able to be applied and make us more efficient moving forward.
Yeah, well, a lot of innovations have come out of it. A lot of like in the home, as you mentioned before. So that's good. And so, are we prepared in your mind as a system if there is another, not even COVID necessarily, but a different type of virus? How do we?
I mean, prepared. Who knows what it throws at you. What I would say is where we should be focused on mental health and the health of our children and health of our employees. That's a concern. People have created or have experienced anxiety and loss over the course of the last couple of years, and I think we're going to see a spike in the utilization of mental health. I mean, we're seeing crazy things like college athletes and depression and suicide, and it's just things we haven't experienced in the past. And I think, whether it's all related to it or whether it's partially related, I mean, the pandemic has a lot to do with those things. And so, but again, I think it's, we go back to leadership. I think it's about, being open and honest with your folks. I think it's about being compassionate and having sympathy, the stigma that's associated with things like mental health. We've all got to do a better job at learning about it and being more empathetic towards it when we see it, because it's real, right? Even though I may not feel it personally at a certain time, it's real for other people, and you've got to make sure that you're, that you're having the proper level of care to that.
Running a lab, I think something that was really unique for us was just the throughput and the volume that we've never seen. It was unprecedented. Yep. And I'd have to assume obviously the same on the claims processing side for you guys. So how did you guys handle that? I mean, it was a challenge for us. How did you guys adapt?
Yeah, well, I think you had two things happening for us at the same time, right? You had the influx of those things, and then you had kind of the outflux or the non-existence of some of the electives and things of that nature. And so, I would say that the volume probably wasn't dramatically different because you had the loss of one and the increase of the other.
True.
I think the variety, though, was different. It wasn't like, if you're in a business like ours, the most days processing claims looks exactly the same. This was something different, right? It threw at us a different variable. And then, by the way, you had the federal government and others putting regulations and mandates and things in, so you're changing things in real time. Like, it wasn't like they said, we're going to put this mandate in, you have 4 months to implement it. Put this mandate in, and we want you to start doing it tomorrow.
Yeah.
And so those were the things I think that created the stress points, was the real timeness, if that's a word, of the things that were changing, and trying to make sure that you took care of your the members that we serve and our customers. We had to make sure we took care of them, and it was it was there was a lot of calls after hours, and we're going to announce this tomorrow. And but again, I think we grew from that. We learned a lot. We know we can handle that, and I think about things like WebEx and Teams and all that. We barely used that stuff before, and now now it seems like we're spending all day on it.
Yeah. Hey guys, we're going to take a quick break after a quick message from our sponsor.
MyLabsDirect.com, anytime, anywhere. MyLabsDirect.com, anytime, anywhere.
Hey guys, welcome back to the Leaders Playbook. I'm sitting here with Scott Flannery, CEO of United Healthcare. Scott, just keeping it going here. Want to ask you a little bit about you and kind of what are some of the things that you do. Maybe walk us through the day-to-day, like a daily life of Scott Flannery. What do you do?
Well, so I don't travel as much anymore as I did in some other roles that I had at United Healthcare, which is a good thing. So believe it or not, my morning usually starts with about 45 minutes of just my wife and I talking about what's happening, what's going on. We have coffee together just about every morning, unless I'm out of town, and so that's kind of how I start my day. And quite honestly, that's kind of where I get grounded, and kind of get my mind ready for the day, and also know that my work-life balance is being handled. And so it's there's a game today, or there's practice, or when the kids were younger couldn't drive, it's like, all right, who's taking them, and all these sorts of things. And so it really kind of gave us that half hour to 45 minutes to kind of get that started. From that point, I usually, head to the office or to a meeting if I have it. I'm not really big about, hey, I do emails at this time of the day, or I do this at this time of the day. But that 45 minutes each morning is kind of the one constant I have, where I have a cup of coffee, maybe some toast or some breakfast, and we basically talk about what's going on. From time to time, she says she needs more money in the bank account or whatever it might be. But those are the things that we don't miss on.
Yeah.
So that we're kind of balanced. And then are you going to be home for dinner? Do you have meetings for dinner? And we kind of get our things lined up for that day, and for the next couple of days typically.
Are you like how many hours a night sleeper are you?
So I'm a solid 8 hours.
Really? Yeah.
Oh yeah, it's not uncommon for me to be to be watching TV at 9:30 and be done at 10 o'clock. Yeah. I try to get up around 5:30 or so. But yeah, I generally get a solid 7.5 at least. I can't function with that unless I do that.
You try to go through routines, and otherwise, like I've tried to do the 4 to 5 hour kind of. I can't do it either.
Yeah.
I need my
I
7
need my
to 8
sleep
for sure. So that's interesting. How about diet? What do you eat?
I fluctuate on that. I'm again, as an avid outdoorsman, I'm a big fan of the smoker and wild game and all those sorts of things. So I probably overdo that a little bit too much. But other than that, we eat relatively healthy in our house. And when my daughter's home, again, she's a Division I athlete, and so usually when she's home, we eat a little bit healthier, because she's kind of a health nut when it comes to that. And so so it just depends, kind of what's going on. When it's just my wife and my son and I, and she's at school, it probably falls off the rails a little bit.
So you green egg, Traeger, or something different?
So I have the Traeger.
Okay.
At the ranch, I have a offset smoker, which I love doing that, but that's a totally different set of rules and a time commitment.
Yeah.
The Traeger is, what's their logo? Set it and forget it. So the Traeger works pretty well.
Yeah. So what's the specialty, man? If I come over and you cook it up, what's the thing?
So I know that there's a lot of people that make really good ribs. I do dry ribs, and so I've been told that they're really good.
Yeah.
I think they're good, but everybody thinks their own barbecue is good. But I'll make them for the hockey dads or whatever it might be, and so people generally like the dry rub ribs.
Very cool.
Smoked.
Yeah. So I like to ask this question too. One, just to get the routine, I think it's important. A lot of people want to know kind of what do you do and what differentiates you. I like to ask this question too. So if you could go, back in time or into the future or otherwise, who's someone you'd want to meet, a dead or alive, someone that that inspires you?
Yeah. So again, without getting overly sentimental, my father died. My mom was pregnant with me, and so it would have been nice to have met him.
Yeah.
But I don't really look back at most things. I mean, I look at things and say, hey, everything happens for a reason. I tell my kids that all the time. Like, you don't get into this school, or this person doesn't ask you to, whatever it is. I don't really focus a whole lot on the past. It seems to me like a waste of energy and a waste of time. I think the same things when we're doing business, right? It's like, hey, we need to know what happened and why it happened, but let's not dwell on it because we can't change it. Let's not make that mistake again.
Right.
But we move forward. So I don't really dwell on the past a whole lot. It just doesn't make sense to me.
Probably parallels how you handle stress. So kind of what are some of those trigger or mechanisms that you use to kind of deal with? Because you're in a high stress position. So what do you do there? How do you balance yourself through all of that?
To me, it's about, again, you see different things over the course of your career. I think the people who really struggle with stress and who maybe show it externally, I think don't have a good work-life balance. So to me, it's always about that. Like, you have to have that time when you get away. So is it a good example? When I get home at night, probably around 7 o'clock or so, my phone goes on a charger, not near me. So I'm not dealing with, and my folks, people, as important as you might think you are, people begin to learn what your habits are. And so people know, unless you call my phone and it rings my watch, I'm not checking things after 7:30 at night or something like that, because that's my family time. That's my time to recharge my battery and those sorts of things. And so I think that has helped me over the course of my career deal with stresses. When I'm away, I'm away, and when I'm working, I'm working. That's good. So if you commingle those two, then you're never away, and I think things build up.
Yep. I've always made a habit myself of the same. Family time's family time. It's sanctitude. It's but also, like, when I'm in a meeting with someone, I'm not checking the phone typically, and I get, sometimes people are like, I can't get a hold of you, but it's because I'm focused on that person. And
it's a pet peeve of mine.
Yeah.
I see sales guys checking their phone, and I mean, what is that telling the customer?
Yeah.
Right? Like,
I'm not here with you.
I'm not here with you, and there's something else more important. When you're with somebody, that should be the most important thing that's happening at that time.
That's right. Unless it's mama or the wife calling you.
Well, there's emergencies. There's no doubt about that. But
when are you going to be home for dinner?
Yeah, right. Well, that's not an emergency, but sometimes it is.
It can be. So, if you could give tips to anyone, some quick leadership tips that you've learned along the way, what would those be overall?
It's interesting. I was thinking about this as I was driving here, and I think I shared this with Kristen. When I'm coaching new leaders or somebody who's about to move into a leadership position, one of the exercises I like to do with them is say, at your retirement party, there's 15 people standing around that worked with you, under you, on your team over the course of your career. What do you want them to say about you?
Yeah.
And how do you want them to talk about you as a leader? Because as a new leader, you actually have a chance to do that, right? But if you don't think about it, you don't write it down, you don't put some thought into how you want to be perceived, then you may not be perceived that way. And then check yourself on that, whether it's quarterly or every 6 months. Check and say, am I actually doing those things? And so I actually did that very early on in my career. It's like, how do I want people to see me? And how do I want to be thought of as a leader? I mean, not that you want to jump right away to your retirement, but that's the way you want to be perceived. You have an unwritten script that you can write on day one as a leader if you do those things. So I think that's one of the best tips. Again, it's kind of self-serving because it's my idea, but I think it's a good way for folks to kind of build what they want to be over the course of their career. And you're gonna flex out of that, right? You're gonna get stressed. There's gonna be something happening in your business that makes you not do those things. But if you can always kind of bring yourself back to the center and be what you want to be, then that's the way people will remember you.
Self-serving as it may be, that's why we brought you on the show today. And I thank you so much for coming and joining us here on the Leaders Playbook.
Thanks a lot.
Guys, thank you so much for joining us on this edition of the Leaders Playbook. Be sure to tune in next week as we bring on other exciting CEOs that are here to give us, again, tips and tricks on what it takes to be the best leader you can possibly be. Thanks again for joining us. Be sure to like us on LinkedIn, follow us on social media, and we hope to see you guys next time.